This is the 3D VIEW-MASTER Battle of the Monsters from the Animal World, presented by Warner Brothers Pictures, directed by Irwin from 1956. The Reign of the Dinosaurs. This is the story of the life and death struggles of the great dinosaurs, which lived many millions of years ago. No man ever saw a dinosaur. In fact, until 1818, no one even suspected their existence. In that year, bird-like tracks in stone found in Connecticut gave the first clue to perhaps the strangest creatures that ever lived. Soon bones, teeth and complete skeletons were dug up. From them, scientists were able to picture a whole new race of reptiles which had walked the land, swum the seas and winged through the air of our Earth's distant past. They were named dinosaurs, a Latin word meaning terrible lizards. Some dinosaurs were no larger than a chicken. Some grew to be the largest animals ever to walk the earth. Some walked on 4 legs, some on 2. In great numbers they swarmed over the face of the earth during the age of reptiles, which lasted from 200 million years ago to 70 million years ago. Let us stop a moment to think about just how long ago this was, and how long a period of time the dinosaurs were masters of the earth. Most scientists agree that life, one-celled animals swimming in a warm and nameless sea, began about 2 billion years ago. Now, let us suppose that all the time 2 billion years ago to the present day were compressed into a single year. Then, on January 1st, those first one-celled creatures came to life. Not until October 1st, really 1.5 billion years later, did animals with backbones, vertebrates, develop. Dinosaurs appeared on November 24th. They ruled the world for 23 days of our comparison year and were gone by December the 16th. Man did not arrive until 4 hours before midnight on December the 31st. In fact, on our time chart, all of recorded history takes up less than 3 minutes. The birth of Christ was only 30 seconds ago. The Earth, 200 million BC. When the dinosaurs roamed the Earth was almost another world, one we would hardly recognize. Most of the world was flat with rolling plains where forests of giant ferns fringed endless swamps. A vast inland sea rolled over the central United States and Canada. The highest mountain ranges of today, the Alps, the Rockies and the Himalayas, had not yet been born. It was a hot, moist world. Palm trees grew in Greenland and there was no winter on the earth. A red sun shone weakly through the mists upon an almost colorless blue, green and gray world. No flowers brightened the landscape. The first flower would not bloom for millions of years. No birds sang, for there were no birds. It was a silent world where the hiss of reptiles and the swish of great bodies brushing through the wet ferns was disturbed only by the sudden, horrible outcry of the battle of monsters, which lived upon the earth 200 million years ago. The Battle of the Monsters, VIEW-MASTER Reel 1. Brontosaurus and Allosaurus. Scene 1. The reptiles, descendants of the ambitions, were the first to conquer the land. From the bottom of the oceans they came, grew into strange creatures, dominated the sea, invaded the land and became kings of the earth. And outnumbering all the other reptiles were the dinosaurs. One of the largest was the Brontosaurus, which lived more in the water than on land. Designed by nature in a freakish manner so that she was hardly able to support her massive 30-ton weight on land. This huge monster spent most of her time wading in the waters of the world. She came up on the land only to seek food or lay eggs. Scene 2. On land, this 70-foot dinosaur stood on 4 huge legs shaped like pillars. When she walked, the earth trembled and shook, There was a noise like distant thunder. For this reason, scientists named her Brontosaurus, thunder lizard. Large as the Brontosaurus was, she was feared by none. Small dinosaurs scurried out of her way to avoid being stepped on, but she would not have hurt them. Her blunt teeth were made solely for chewing the water plants and tree tops that satisfied her appetite. Scene 3. The head of the Brontosaurus was scarcely more than a swelling at the end of its long neck. The brain inside was not as large as yours or mine. When it came time for her to lay eggs, some dim instinct may have led her at times to choose a protected place. More often she laid them right out in the open to be hatched by the heat of the tropical sun. Although it seems odd for such a great animal to lay eggs the size of footballs, we must remember that all the dinosaurs were reptiles. Being reptiles, most of them laid eggs, and all were covered with horny scales instead of skin and were cold-blooded. The blood was sometimes warm, sometimes cool, not always the same temperature like the blood of mammals or warm-blooded creatures. When the air around the dinosaurs was warm, their blood was warm and they were very active. When it was cold outside, their blood flowed sluggishly and they could hardly move. Scene 4. Mortal enemy of the Brontosaurus was the Allosaurus, leaping lizard. This great flesh-eater was armed with bristling rows of savage, knife-like teeth. His small front limbs had strong, sharp claws. Tooth and claw, he could rip and slash great chunks of flesh from his unlucky prey. Scene 5. In his prehistoric day, the Allosaurus was feared by every living thing on Earth. Even the giant plant eaters got out of his way. Young Brontosauruses were his favorite food, and when hungrier than usual, he would even attack a full-grown Brontosaurus. Standing erect on his curiously bird-like hind legs, the Allosaurus, seesawing his long, heavy tail for balance, circled the slower Brontosaurus, waiting for an opening. Roars issued from his throat as he leaped back and forth, answered by the high, frightened hissing of the alarmed Brontosaurus. Scene 6. A danger signal slowly filtered up to the huge plant-eater's tiny brain. Another signal, run, went forth to her sluggish muscles. Before the Allosaurus could summon up enough courage to leap, the giant animal trundled off, wading out into the deep waters of the swamp. She was safe even from the terrible Allosaurus. Treating the jungle air to ear-splitting screams of rage, the Allosaurus wandered off in search of a smaller kill. Scene 7. Day after day, alone and unguarded, in the tropical sun, the dinosaur eggs lay. As the fierce noon sunshine warmed through the thick shell, life began to stir within. One egg began to move a little and a scratching sound could be heard. Then the first crack marred the shell and then another. At last the egg broke in half to reveal a baby Brontosaurus. Less than a foot high, the creature stood up on elephant-like legs and breathed in the air of 200 million years ago. A few shaky steps and the tiny dinosaur had left forever the safety of the shell. Now it must face the savage struggle for survival of its strange, prehistoric world. If it survived and grew to full size, it would in turn lay other eggs. The life cycle would then be completed. VIEW-MASTER Reel 2, Tyrannosaurus and Stegosaurus. Scene 1. Later in the same Jurassic period, about 150 million years ago, lived a frightening meat-eating Ceratosaurus, horned lizard. He stood 20 feet high and weighed 8 tons. He was one of the first dinosaurs with a horn-like growth on his head. The heavy blunt horn protruded from the snout like the horn of a modern rhinoceros. Scene 2. Into the hunting territory of the Ceratosaurus came a creature out of a nightmare, the Stegosaurus, roofed lizard. A double row of toothed, triangular blades ran the length of this dinosaur's arched back. 4 long spikes, each as big and heavy as a steer's horn, swished at the end of his powerful tail. But his pygmy head, almost lost in this 25-foot-long reptile, encased a brain no larger than a walnut. His brain was so simple that it needed another, a brain-like cluster of nerves at the other end of its spine, just to operate its hind legs. Scene 3. Easily avoiding the other's slow-moving tail, the Ceratosaurus leaped in with a fearful roar, biting deeply into the Stegosaurus' back plates. Hissing with pain, the plant-eater struggled to free itself from the mighty jaws. Suddenly, the horned dinosaur released his grip and leaped forward to clamp his massive jaws on the other's tiny head. Frantically, the Stegosaurus thrashed his tail in his dying struggles, but already his head was half eaten. The Ceratosaurus released his mortally wounded prey, which fell over and with a last feeble kick died. Scene 4. The victory was not to be enjoyed so easily, for an invader appeared on the scene. Looking up from his first bite, the killer saw another Ceratosaurus. He sounded an angry warning roar, but the invader was hungry too. In fact, the newcomer probably cared little whether he feasted on Stegosaurus or Ceratosaurus meat. Scene 5. Kill or be killed, eat or be eaten. These were the rules of that incredible ancient world. And so another duel to the death began. Only the fittest would survive. The one who proved to be the strongest, the fastest, or the most cunning would live. As the invader sprang in to snatch a bite of the dead Stegosaurus, the first one leaped to defend his kill, balancing on their great hind legs and baring their cruel teeth with great roars of defiance. The two killers circled warily. The first dinosaur lowered its head and charged. The blunt horn crushed into giant ribs. Scene 6. Wounded, the invader leaped back to await the next charge. The pain from his broken ribs kindled a brief flash of more than reptilian intelligence in his small brain. As the first fighter lunged, the wounded one sidestepped, then jumped in to bury his deadly teeth in the throat of his foe. Bellowing in anguish, the first Ceratosaurus tried to break the death grip, but a great vein had been slashed. As his blood ran out, the Ceratosaurus grew weaker and fell to the ground. Scene 7. Leaving his dead victim, the invading dinosaur moved in on the dinner the other had killed for him. He bit off great chunks of raw meat and greedily swallowed them. Often he stood up and craned his neck, peering around. Now he was eating, but in this world of monsters there might be flesh eaters even larger and more terrible. Unless he kept watch, the next minute he might be eaten. VIEW-MASTER Reel 3, Triceratops and Tyrannosaurus Rex. Scene 1. Millions of years passed, dinosaurs lived and died. New forms appeared on the changing face of the earth. Deep rumbling from beneath the earth's crust foretold of a new era of mountain building. Some peaks, still sharp and jagged, had already pushed their way high above the clouds. 70 million years ago, the first flowers bloomed. Feeding upon them was a dinosaur named the Triceratops, 3-horned face. This monstrous creature had a body like that of a rhinoceros, but was 24 feet long, tall as an elephant and weighed twice as much. Scene 2. In that same period lived the most terrifying animal the world has ever seen, Tyrannosaurus Rex, king of the tyrant lizards. This monster roamed the forest of tall cycads ancient sequoias and giant ferns, undisputed ruler of the world. To satisfy his ravenous appetite, Tyrannosaurus waded into the shallow seas to devour luckless sea monsters or even plucked pterodactyls, flying reptiles with 20-foot leathery wings, out of the air. The scaly body of the Tyrannosaurus was like that of a gigantic crocodile, 50 feet in length. He walked in giant strides with his head 20 feet in the air. The head alone was 4 feet in length, and the gaping jaws held rows of 6-inch teeth. Scene 3. The savage world these beasts lived in was one of violent contrast. One moment the Triceratops fed peacefully in the roots of a tree, on the roots of a tree he had torn up. The next moment he looked up to face the dreaded flesh-eating tyrant lizard. Of all the dinosaurs of that time, the Triceratops was the closest match for the king of the reptiles. His defenses were formidable. On an armored hide and a great flaring ruffle of bone that protected his neck and skull. The vicious parrot-like beak, the sharp horn on his snout, and above all the 2 great curving spikes that jutted out over his eyes were death-dealing weapons. Scene 4. But Tyrannosaurus had no fear of the horns. He sprang forward with a powerful leap. The Triceratops lowered his head menacingly. The attacker jumped from side to side, but always the 3 horns followed him. Tyrannosaurus had hunted and killed Triceratops before. He was sure of his kill. At just the right moment, he would start to move one way, then would suddenly change directions. As the horns of the slower-moving foe swung aside, he would leap in to clamp murderous jaws into the other's thick, scaly hide. Scene 5. The sky reddened suddenly, then a quivering of the earth threw the king lizard off balance for just a second. A second was all the Triceratops needed for its charge. A long eye horn buried itself in the body of the terrible killer. The Tyrannosaurus' great mouth opened in a blood-curdling bellow of outraged pain and surprise. The king of the earth had been betrayed by the shaking of the very earth itself. The bloody horn was withdrawn for the death thrust. Scene 6. The blow was never delivered. Just then a booming roar shook the air, and the very sky caught fire. Even the battling monsters froze in the middle of their fight to the death. An unknown fear gripping their primitive emotions, they looked around at their once familiar world. The earth under their feet rose and fell like the waves of the sea. The blue of the sky had vanished in a blood-red deluge of light, and the silence was broken by the booming of vast explosions in the distance. Scene 7. After millions of years of comparative quiet, the earth was already to break loose into a fury of volcanic activity. Mountains blew their tops. Flowing lava engulfed many dinosaurs, and ashes killed the plants to starve even more. Great cracks opened up in the ground. Into them tumbled many of these great monsters. Also, into the cracks poured the water of the swamps and shallow seas with a violent hissing and boiling. The doom of the dinosaurs was at hand. Mountains were lifted to replace the humid, vegetation-rich lowlands. Soon there was not food enough for the plant eaters, and when the plant eaters starved, the flesh eaters began to eat each other. Winter came back to the world in the cold. The dinosaurs grew sluggish and many perished. The warm-blooded little mammals, which began to appear about that time, dined on the reptile eggs, so many dinosaurs did not even hatch. The total disappearance of the dinosaur is one of the great mysteries of all time. While the causes mentioned above undoubtedly killed thousands of dinosaurs, their complete extinction cannot be explained. This whole race of reptiles which dominated the face of the earth, its waters and its atmosphere for 100 times as long as the short span of man on earth. This whole race died out, leaving not one single descendant. Only a few bones preserved in the eternal rock testifies to the fact that dinosaurs ever lived at all.